I've been training this espalier apple tree for a couple of years now, and I think we're finally at the point where pruning is less about shaping the tree and more about, hopefully, finally getting some apples next year. There's no guarantees, it's still early days yet, but if I do this right, this might be the turning point. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how and why I'm pruning so you can follow along whether you're starting your own apple espalier or if you just want to see how this all turns out. You can absolutely buy an already set up espalier fruit tree. The thing is, they're really expensive, and I don't know if I'm just a glutton for punishment, but I really like doing these types of things myself. The thing that you need to be prepared for with espalier is that it's gonna take a while. You have to slowly establish the shape and put all of the tree's energy toward getting the structure right before you can even think about fruiting. Most fruit trees take a few years to begin fruiting anyway, and then you add onto that this very specific structure you're trying to create, and it just takes time, so you do have to be patient. But let me show you what I mean. Okay, this is the apple tree I'm talking about. It's a variety called Einsheimer, and this is actually only its second year, which is crazy. It has really grown like mad. I think it's really happy in this spot. But as you can see, we have the bottom tier that's filled all the way to the end of the trellis, and you can kind of see the second tier is also just about to the end, and now I've got all this crazy stuff going on, so I think I've made a good start on the third tier. This is a lot of growth for a year and a half, essentially. So last year it was just the sort of 1 3/4 tiers, and the rest of this has filled in the current growing season. But that's kind of the way this goes. Year 1, you plant, you chop off the main trunk, and then you start to grow the bottom tier. If you're lucky, you might be able to get started on the second one. Year 2, that's this year, we're gonna work on the second and third tiers. I'm gonna see how the season goes. I might even add a fourth. I have room on my fence up here. But it's year 3 that is really the first chance for fruiting to happen. I don't know if I'm gonna get fruit this year, but you can bet that I'm gonna do everything within my power while I'm pruning to see if I can make that happen. You might be wondering about why I'm pruning now in summer. So let's talk for a second about the difference between summer pruning and winter pruning and why it's so crucial for espalier fruit trees to prune in the summer. Hot take, it's helpful for a lot of fruit trees, but that's a different video, literally a different video. I've made a video on summer pruning, so I'll link to that. So pruning in the summer versus the winter has different functions. When you're pruning in the winter, it's mostly about removing anything that's dead or damaged and just taking a look at the overall structure and health of the tree. And in the summertime though, when we can see what's actually happening, this is the time to remove excessive growth, to thin things out, to influence the structure, and it actually has the function of slowing down growth in a way, or rather focusing growth to where you want it to be. When you prune in late winter, right before spring, that sort of wakes up the tree and it just starts to grow like crazy. When you prune in summer, it sort of controls growth, if that makes sense. And that's why it's so important for espalier trees to have at least one summer pruning. So for me, in my climate, I'm in zone 8B in East Texas, so it's a hot, humid, long growing season. So it's now the end of June, and this is gonna be the first time I'm pruning this summer. I probably could have done it a little sooner. As you can see, it's kind of insane. I will probably have to prune at least one more time, if not twice, before the end of the growing season, just to kind of keep things in check, just because, like I said, it's a really long growing season. If you live further north in a milder climate, you might only have to prune one time in the summer. And typically that time is right in the middle of the summer. So for people more in the north, in cooler climates, that might be like July or August. For me, this is a pretty good time. I'm happy with this end of June time to do my first main pruning, and then I'll just keep an eye on it, and if I need to do more, I will later in the summer. Okay, we're ready to get actually started on the pruning. I've got my sharp and sanitized pruning shears. You definitely have to sanitize. Trust me, you don't want to be spreading diseases while you're pruning. Okay, so the first thing that I'm gonna do is clean up any of the like really vigorous upward shoots that aren't coming off of one of my hero lateral branches. So I'll bring you a little bit closer in a second, but this one is growing off of the main trunk. It has no function, it doesn't need to be here, it's just taking energy away from the tree. So I'm gonna look for things like this to prune, and then we'll do the next step. Whew. I think it's always good to have a reminder about pruning techniques. So let me just show you what you're looking for. Whenever you're removing a branch completely, you want to cut it right at the base of the branch, but above the branch collar. That's this part that sort of widens out at the bottom of the branch. If you cut it too low, it's gonna have a hard time healing over, and that's when you might have like an issue with pests or diseases moving in. So you want to cut it just above that point where it widens out at the base. The next thing is to look for any branches that are growing downward or just at an angle that you don't want. I'll show you why in a minute, but this is an example of that. It's sort of growing straight out, and there's another branch that's growing up from the same point, so I want to thin these out anyway. I don't think I have any other downward branches, so it's just this one. Okay, before I do anything else, I'm going to take a look at the structure and figure out what is going to be this next tier of lateral branches. So I've got these two big guys that are definitely contenders, but I also need one branch to become the new central leader, the new central trunk. So one of these is going to have to be that. I think it's going to be this one. It's nice and strong. And that means this branch below, even though it's a little bit like kind of at a weird angle, that's going to work well to train as my other lateral. So I know I need to leave these top 3 branches alone. So now that I've chosen my structural branches at the top, I can remove any other branches that are growing off of the central main trunk. Okay, we're looking good so far. I think the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and tie my new lateral branches and the new central leader to the wires, so that way they're kind of out of my way and I can keep my eye on them. Friendly note, double, triple check before you make any cuts, because it's really easy to accidentally cut the wrong thing, and once you do, it's going to be a pain to fix it. So, friendly warning. Okay, now we get to the really important part, and this is where we work on creating the spurs that are going to bear the fruit next year. So a fruiting spur is basically just a short, stocky branch, and that's where fruit buds occur, and that's where the apples are going to be. The way we're going to do that is, do you see all of these branches, little branches that are growing off of my main laterals? So I'm going to shorten these so that they have only 2 or 3 leaf nodes, 2 or 3 buds. And then those are going to become my fruiting buds, hopefully, next year. So all I need to do is take one of these branches. I'll start with this one. Look at the base. We've got, at the bottom of each branch, you've got what's called the basal cluster of leaves, and it's this little kind of cluster of leaves right around the base of the branch. So above that cluster, you want to count 1, 2, maybe 3, and cut a little bit above that top leaf node, about 1/4 inch. And now I've got a fruiting spur. Now I just have to do that a whole bunch more times. Now it looks like an espalier. So I've done all of my trimming of the spur fruiting branches. Now I just need to take a look and see if there are any crowded areas. So I want those fruiting spurs to be spaced out a little bit, at least 4 inches apart, 4 to 6 inches. So if there are any spots where things are too crowded, you might want to remove one of those. I think I'm generally okay Yeah, if I look, nothing is really too crowded on my tree. Here's one little spot down on this bottom branch that I'm gonna trim. So that's all the pruning I need to do right now. I think I did a good job, but here's the thing, even if I did everything right, there's still no guarantees. I have to, keep pruning throughout the summer as needed. I have to watch out for pests and diseases. I have to, guard it from late frost. I have to guard it from the extreme summer heat and sometimes drought that we get. That's why I've got a pretty thick layer of mulch down. So there's a lot of factors at play here, but at least I can be fairly confident that I did what I could to make sure that this fruits next year. As you can see, I've got most of the structure filled in. I can see that this branch needs to grow a little bit more. So here's what I'm gonna do is, even though I've tied it to this wire, I am gonna let it kind of loose and continue to hopefully, well, if I can kind of finagle it a little bit, almost get it to face upward. It's not working very well, but that's the idea. If you can get it, I'm gonna do it off camera just because I'm fussing a little bit, but if you can get it so that it's pointed a little bit upward without breaking the branch, this keeps the apical dominance here at the tip of the branch. Maybe I'll just let it hang out for a bit longer before I train it. You can see there is still new growth coming at the end. That's a good sign that this is going to continue to grow. The minute you pin it sideways, that apical dominance goes away and the top of the plant starts to take over the main part of the growth. So if you want one of your branches to grow longer, keep it so that it's more or less to the top of the plant. So I may leave this guy alone for a little bit longer and see if I can get a few more inches of growth here. There's still a lot of summer left, a lot of the growing season left, so I'm gonna see a lot more growth as this year goes on. And like I said, I might even start a 4th tier. Let me know in the comments if you think I should do that. Training an espalier is an act of patience. You do the work now, you trust the process, and then you just leave the rest to time. If all goes well, this time next year, I'll actually be picking apples from this very tree. So here's to slow progress, careful pruning, and maybe, just maybe, apples next year. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.